Welcome back. We're talking about Pakistan-India relations, 70 years since partition created two independent nations. Let's get back to our panel right now. Let me go to Mohan in New Delhi. And Mohan, we've been listening to a lot of reasons why these two countries have had such a bad relationship over the past 70 years. What is your view? Can it get better, or do you see it getting worse?
Well, at this moment, it doesn't look very hopeful. But, you can't get any worse than this. You haven't been talking for 70 years. You've been shouting at each other, and, you've been talking past each other, and this can't go on for long. I think there's a huge population there waiting for a better life, more expectations of of the good things in life, and you can't continue like this. Both India and Pakistan have to invest in each other, and we've got common problems. For instance, we're going to be hit by serious water shortages in the next 20-30 years. Pakistan particularly would be very severely hit. So we'll have to manage groundwater, we'll have to manage our environment, and for this both countries need to work together, and to work together you need to start talking first. So I think we should take issues which we can do. Trade, most favored nation between the two countries.
Right.
I think we got to implement that. We are the only two big countries in the world who don't trade with each other.
All right, let me go to Mosharraf on that. Mosharraf, where do you think is the greatest potential for these two countries to have better relations? Would it be things like trade? Would it be things like perhaps coming together on discussing their scarce water resources? Where does it start?
I've for several years I've believed that trade is the answer, and I think that the example that inspires many Pakistanis to think about trade with India in a positive light is the experience of India with China. China and India are currently experiencing difficulties in their relationship, and yet the quantum of trade between the two countries continues to grow. So I think it's really, I think trade is a really unexplored area. There is a huge appetite for certain kinds of Pakistani goods and services in India, and there's similarly a huge appetite for many Indian products and services here in Pakistan. I think beyond trade, I think it's about ideas and about intellectual engagement. Some of the biggest problems, water has already been mentioned, but the other big one is urbanization. India and Pakistan are going to have dozens upon dozens of cities with a population larger than 5 million. These are places that were never designed to cater to the needs of 5 million people or more. Urbanization is a topic that's been ignored almost entirely in the entire region, and I think that Indians and Pakistanis will ultimately need to sit down together and think through these issues creatively to solve the very problems that we've been talking about.
And on the issue of expanding trade, Mosharraf, India has granted Pakistan most favored nation status, as Mohan pointed out, but it's a two-way street, isn't it? Why hasn't it been done the other way?
Well, it was done the other way, at least in principle. But the problem is that despite offering most favored nation status, there are a range of non-trade and non-tariff barriers that prevent Pakistani goods and services from reaching India. And so the hawks in Pakistan see those barriers and use them as an argument against opening up trade. There is a huge lobby that, at least in Pakistan, and certainly I think also in India, maybe to a lesser extent, that actually works to prevent trade. And part of that lobby is inspired by the kind of nationalisms that we were talking about earlier. The very fact that such a robust lobby exists on both sides of the border to prevent free trade between the two countries, or at least free trade in some areas between the two countries, is proof of the fact that once trade opens up, a lot of the resistance to India in Pakistan and to Pakistan in India is going to start to wither away.
We've had a lot of agreement on this show, so let me disagree with my friend Mosharraf there. I certainly agree that trade would solve a lot of problems, but there is no real opposition in India to a bigger trade relationship or more open trade with Pakistan. On the Pakistani side, I think this is this goes back to sort of very sort of sensitive ideas about Hindu domination of the economy and things that really you can look back to some of the ideas that were seeded in the Pakistan movement itself. So I'm not condoning the resistance, but the resistance has been very deep-rooted, right?
So are you saying that things like nationalism, jingoism, if you want to call that, get in the way of a better trade relationship?
What I'm saying is that there is a tremendous amount of nationalism and jingoism on both sides of the border. But on the question of trade and economics, that is not something that is being blocked by Indian trade, Indian nationalism or jingoism. Yeah. The part that concerns me, where I think that there is a blockage that is on the Indian side increasingly, is on cultural links. People being able to share each other's, the musicians and actors and writers, and just being able to have very normal, easy.
But isn't that happening already?
That is happening now, and that is a new thing,
yeah.
And that is what is it's of great concern to me, because what we've had through most of these 70 years, even though there's been hostility between the governments, there has been a very easy sort of intercourse between Indians and Pakistanis when they meet each other, and that shouldn't be surprising because they have so many commonalities. Right. What I worry is that in what is happening now is that some people want to shut that down. So, for instance, they want to ensure that no Pakistanis can act in Bollywood, right? And it's those kind of trends. It's those trends. It's the idea that we should cut off cultural links in what is to a large degree a common culture. That, to me, is the single most worrying trend.
But the point is, to what end? Why?
Oh, I think that nationalists on the Indian side have a deep hostility, or a Hindu nationalist, the Hindu right, they have a deep hostility to all things Pakistani, and they don't distinguish, as I think sensible people do, between, say, problems with the military or the intelligence wing and the vast majority of Pakistanis. And so they look at the terrorism issue, and then they use that to target all aspects of the relationship.
What is your view, Nasir? I mean, does expanding cultural relationships or trade relationships create a better environment for better relations between these two countries? Mosharraf cites a good example there where China and India have a problem, a border dispute, but they still trade with each other, and that trade relationship is expanding.
Yes. As far as my personal opinion is concerned, there should be a trade between Pakistan and India on a massive level. But people who are like creating hindrance between trade between these two countries, they are of the view that unless we won't have a peaceful atmosphere, it would not be a good idea to have a trade. Similarly, look at the cultural exchanges between India and Pakistan. Pakistani musicians or stars, they were going to Bollywood for work. They have been denied that. Like, they are not harming anyone. So they are doing some positive things. Even then, people in India, they are not accepting them. Apart from that, I would add that instead of focusing on traditional security, we need to focus on human security. Because traditional security is not it's only on borders, but when we talk about human security, we will have to move beyond the traditional security. We will have to talk about trade, we will have to talk about education, health, so many other issues. And there is a range of issues on which we can talk, on which we can have dialogue, and on which we can have positive, constructive interactions. Like trade, of course, is very important. And right now, level of trade between Pakistan and India is very low. As China and India, apart from their problems, they are working together and they are having a good amount of trade between them. So why not India and Pakistan? Instead of doing trade from third country, like you want to import anything and you will have to import that via Dubai or some other channel, why not from Wagah to Atari border? So there is a strong need for both countries to develop relations so that they can have trade. And for that purpose, you will have to have an atmosphere where you can talk about trade. Right now, you don't even like to talk about talks, so how can you talk about trade?
Right. Mohan, if we look at these current differences between India and Pakistan, hostilities, if you like, how does it play out internationally or regionally? I mean, you have India, which is strengthening its relationship with the United States. There is a burgeoning relationship between China and Pakistan. China is involved through its Belt and Road initiative. in Pakistan as well. How do you see this balance work out in that part of the world?
Well, I think, you know, it doesn't work out too well at all, because the more India gets closer to the United States, China takes offense at it, and when China takes offense, it tends to do things in Pakistan which upset India. We're not really so upset about the road or giving conventional arms, but it's the new transfer of nuclear technology, missiles, which keep bothering us and which concern us a lot. And so, this kind of, our relationships are now becoming increasingly hostage to relationships with other countries. Strictly speaking, if Pakistan has good economic relations with China, we shouldn't be concerned. It's a good thing for Pakistan to get that road, because it will get some investment into Pakistan, provided Pakistan can service the debt. It's a good thing for India to do more business with the United States, but provided it doesn't get into, it doesn't get linked up with buying American arms. So there are lots of things which need to be worked out, and both countries are, India has had tradition of strategic autonomy and would like to keep that autonomy. Even now, even under the Modi government, there isn't that full move to get even much more closer to America. For instance, we don't have really any significant arms agreements or weapons transfer agreement or technology transfer agreements still in place. There's lots of resistance to that in India. And the Chinese, I think, interestingly, seem to appreciate that more than the Pakistanis and other people. But internationally speaking, this conflict between India and Pakistan is beginning to bore people all over the world. I go to world conferences where the Indian side and Pakistani start their usual Kashmir business or whatever, and people are just tired of it.
Okay, Mosharraf, you get the last word in this. At the outset of the program, you expressed a lot of hope that the relationship between India and Pakistan can change, can evolve. What are the markers or benchmarks that we should be looking for in the near term to see this change that you would like to see?
So I think that a lot of us expected both Nawaz Sharif and Narendra Modi to be transformational leaders, and at every stage in which they made some efforts towards bringing the countries, or at least bringing each other closer to each other, for every effort that they made, they also gave in to resistances, both domestically and beyond. I think that one of the lessons from the Modi-Sharif era is that moral leadership that is able to plow through domestic opposition or resistance is incredibly important. And every time they did make an effort, suddenly the environment seemed to change. Suddenly all the Hindu right-wingism seemed to take a backseat. Suddenly the military didn't matter when Modi and Sharif met. And so for me, the reason that I'm optimistic is that whilst these two leaders may have failed and may have given in to their domestic constituencies that were frankly overpowering, that future leaders in the region, whether in India or in Pakistan, will be able to plow through that resistance and power through that resistance. So I'm hoping, and my optimism is based on moral leadership in India and in Pakistan.
Okay, that's where we have to leave it. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being with us.